lot of our math, helps analyze a lot of the statistics that we use in analyzing what's going on Battle.net. I don't know if these guys need an introduction, but I'll do it anyway. Got David Kim, just a great player and wonderful designer who does a lot of the heavy lifting on the Balance team alongside his partner in crime, Matt Cooper. Also just a great player and a great designer. And this is the group that does most of the work. And we obviously get a lot of feedback from other folks, but this is the group that does most of the work when we talk about multiplayer in StarCraft 2. So we're going to make a presentation for you guys that sort of describes some of the processes that we go through and gives you a little bit of insight into the stuff that we're looking at right now and maybe some of the things we have planned for some of our future patches. Is there anybody out there that has any questions at all about StarCraft 2 multiplayer? Anybody? Just a few people? All right. So get your questions ready because we'll hopefully have a lot of time for you guys to ask us whatever you want about what we've done or what we're going to do down the road. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we balance the game. So we have a lot of different tools that we use to balance this game. We have community feedback, we have pro feedback, we have our own play experience, we have a lot of stats that we gather. But the important thing to know about these tools is that they all fundamentally fail us at some critical point. Every one of these tools at some point we thought was the promised land. We had finally found the tool that would save us, that would be the perfect answer to everything we need, and then we found out it kind of sucked. So the only trick that we've got is we have to use all of these tools together. We want multiple tools to agree about what the direction is, what we should do, and only if these tools sort of fight together as a team do we have any real hope of finding the right answer, but what we want to do in the balance of the game.
So I'm going to talk to you guys today about our first tool, and this is kind of our first line of defense, and it's you guys, it's our community. And one of the best things about this is it's hundreds of thousands of players playing millions of games. And of course, this is across all skill levels, all regions. And we get some great debates from you guys. It's really not that useful for us if we have an internal tool that tells us building battle cruisers makes your win percentage go up by 3 points, or that doesn't really tell us anything. Maybe the players making the battle cruisers have already won the game. But when we get these great debates, we can see in what situation a battle cruiser might be overpowered, against what race, how players are using it. And of course, like any good debate, you get the opposite. People arguing it's not overpowered. Here's how to beat it. And of course, like any of our tools, there's some problems. One of the biggest problems with player feedback is the loudest voice tends to win. It's not necessarily about who's right or who's wrong, and not everyone chooses to post on forums. And of course, we get a snowball effect where one player comes along, makes a thread, and a bunch of people jump on that. And by the time someone who disagrees with this or has good debate to bring to the subject, there's 20 posts in a row about how he's wrong, and he doesn't really want to get in an argument with 20 players. But you guys are great at, you're one of our best tools for finding bugs and a lot of stuff that's blatantly wrong that we can't necessarily find in our internal play testing because we don't have enough time. You guys find almost immediately, and it helps make this the best play experience we can for you guys.
Yeah, I think a good example is from the beta. We had many times where we played tens of thousands of games, right? And we had not seen a lot of the stuff that you guys literally found within like 3 hours of the beta going live.
Yeah,
I'm sitting there playing on Battle.net. I'm getting overrun by gateway pushes, and I'm like, oh my God, how did we not see this, right? And then patches were incoming almost immediately.
Okay, so the second tool that we have is pro feedback. Pros really know the game and really lead the strategies that everyone else on Battle.net follows. One example is in the IEM tournament finals, Moro, a great Terran European player, played against Idra and beat him pretty easily using this one specific strategy of going mass barracks with mass Reapers early on. And within a couple days, all over Battle.net, we were seeing this exact same strategy, even in gold, even in platinum, and especially among the diamond level players. And because pros really know the game, they give great critical feedback. For example, Maka, one of the best players currently in the world right now, he's actually here today at Blizzcon as well. He really took his time to refine the Zealot Sentry Void Ray strategy. And he not only sent us replays, but also a very detailed explanation on when to build every unit, as well as how to use these specific units in combat when you engage the enemy. And using this feedback, we were able to make the changes to the Void Ray that, in the patch that we released last week. So the one downside to pro feedback is pros generally only favor one race because they only play one race. So pros have a difficult time judging victory or defeats. Was it because, did I win this game because I was more skillful than the other player, or was there a race imbalance? That's always the hard question for pros to ask themselves. The second downside to pro feedback is pro feedback doesn't necessarily represent all skill levels. Even though people try to follow pro strategies and execute it on their own, the level of execution is not the same, meaning we get different balance across different skill levels. And even though our focus in balancing our game is for the competitive level, we do want the game to be fair and balanced across all levels as well.
So one of our other great tools, of course, is tournaments. We're getting a ton of these here at Blizzcon. If you guys haven't checked out the RTS stage, you really should.
They're so awesome.
We got our homage there to Fruit Dealer, the winner of the first season of the GSL. Absolutely, give it up for Fruit. So the advantage of tournament games, of course, these are great games with great players playing them. And this is the ultimate test of our balance. If there is a tiny crack in our game balance, these guys are going to drive a truck right through it, right? Everything is on the line for these guys. They've got tens of thousands of dollars on the line, their career, their pride, everything, and they've been practicing 8 to 12 hours a day for months on end. So if there's any problems, we're going to see it. We don't tend to look too much at tournament results. And that's because the skill between all these players is not necessarily even. There's no perfect matchmaking in tournaments, right? Sometimes one player just practiced a little bit harder. So I know there was a lot of concern in the community when Fruit Dealer actually won those matches because there was a feeling that Zerg needed a buff. And we actually kind of agreed with that at the time. And then Fruit Dealer went ahead and won, and we were seeing a lot of posts like, oh my God, now they're not going to do anything because they have proof that Zerg is okay. That wasn't proof, right? Fruit Dealer was on the top of his game. He had practiced. He knew everything he needed to know. I think Fruit Dealer done great with any race that he'd practiced on that day. He was top form for that matchup. So you don't know, what players also didn't show up for the match. You don't know what players were sick that day. You don't know what players maybe got unlucky in an early round and got eliminated by a matchup they weren't quite as comfortable with. There's lots of variables in tournaments. So we do look at the games, and that's a very powerful tool. But the exact results would only concern us if we saw something like, oh my God, it's just all Terran all the time. No one's even choosing the other races.
And of course, another tool we use is we play our game. We play our game a lot. And everyone who works on balance is a diamond random player, so we get to see all the matchups and all the maps. So if there's a 6-pool flavor of the week or something you guys are seeing in your games, we're probably seeing that same strategy in our games, and this is great for us. And of course, we have tons of people across Blizzard giving us feedback at all different skill levels, diamond players, bronze players, and we do focus for the esports level for the best play. But if we can fix something at a bronze level that's not going to affect esports, we'll try and do this. We want everyone to have a good experience when playing our game. But again, this is a very small sample size. Like we mentioned earlier, we had played tens of thousands of games going into the beta, but we still couldn't catch some of the warp gate or gateway rush strategies. And, we need a bigger sample size to catch a lot of that stuff.
So we've taken a look at all the opinion-based tools that we use to balance our game. So now look at some concrete tools that we have. First is spreadsheets, and they're great for making simple calculations such as DPS. And in Starcraft 2, not only the damage per second matters, but the damage per shot as well as how often a unit fires matters as well. And it's great to just lay out all these different numbers for every single unit in the game in order to balance our game. Another great thing about spreadsheets is that they're great for analyzing build times and costs. We don't try to equalize the costs of different tech choices, and we also don't try to make every production building needed for every one of the races symmetric, but we do try to make note of all these numbers so that the balance on these numbers can be perfect. The major downside to spreadsheets is that it actually doesn't take into account a lot of the other variables that are going on in the game, such as pathing, terrain, or strategies, or even micro. And to take these into account, we'll actually look at our other tool.
So we have a tool that's an in-game tool called Make Combat, and this is sort of a debug tool that we can use to create battles very quickly and run tests rapidly to see what's going on. And of course, what's great about this, it's in the software, so it accounts for movement, it accounts for pathing. They can account for a lot of the variables that something like a spreadsheet wouldn't use. Like we often have seen, changing something as small as a unit size, as I'm sure you all know, has a significant impact on how well that unit performs. So you can, make a small tweak to the size of the Zealot, quickly use Make Combat, and see what's actually going on. And it also can account for unit costs. Like Starcraft is often balanced for cost, right? We're not balancing unit to unit. We don't care if 7 Zealots beat 7 Marines. That doesn't make any sense. The Zealots cost a lot more. So we can actually set up battles and Make Combat that allow us to test for unit cost to make sure that we're getting it right. So here's an example of Make Combat in action. You can see we're going to type in a command there. We're going to do it for cost, and we're going to speed up the game so we can watch really quickly what's going on. Those Zealots and Stalkers are going to fight those Roaches and Hydras, and as you would expect, it's not going to go very well for our Protoss brothers there. They're going to beat them down. We get a little report there at the end, how many units are left, what percentage is left, what the leftover cost is. And we'll run it again just to make sure that, yeah, this is what's happening, that's what's going on. Let's change it up. Let's put in 10 Immortals instead of 10 those Stalkers. Let's see how it goes. And so as you imagine, this is going much better now for the Protoss, the Immortal being so strong against the Roach. But like everything in StarCraft, a lot of these relationships are very touch and go. And so we want to run it a couple of times to make sure, and we'll run it again just to see what happens. Because of small variations in pathing and small variations in unit target acquisition, suddenly what was an absolute Protoss victory suddenly turns into a narrow Zerg victory. And these are the kinds of relationships we're looking for, because this means terrain and micro will be the deciding factor in this particular battle. So if we talk about, there we go. So Make Combat, of course, we were in love with this tool. This was the greatest tool ever made. We had it. We could just test the game 50 times an hour. We could see whatever we wanted to see, and we could prove to ourselves that everything was great. We were so happy with this. The downside of this tool, of course, is it's sometimes difficult to account for terrain. I mean, you saw that battlefield. When was the last time you were in a battlefield that was that open? Now, we do have some terrain on the debug map, but it's easy to forget to use it as a designer. And the reality is, battles are rarely that perfect. It also fails to analyze the current strategies, what we call the metagame. It fails to analyze what could actually happen in a real battle. Really? 10 Immortals and 10 Zealots? If 4 Mutalisks flew over that formation, those Protoss would be dog meat. I could convince myself with that battle that, oh, hey, look, this is easy for the Protoss. They can counter this with Immortal Zealot. And actually, when you get into a live game, it's a total disaster. This is what we found when we went into beta. We've been using this tool a lot before we went into beta, and when we got to play a lot of games against people of our own skill level, suddenly we're having lots of arguments. We would say, Make Combat says this, and I'm saying, hey, I get it. I can see what Make Combat does too, but I'm telling you, I played last night, and it doesn't work. That's not going to happen. And so the danger of Make Combat, we discovered, was it creates a false sense of security. It makes you believe you know what's going on, and instead of using the other tools, you can start to rely on it to give you proof of what you want to believe. Hey, I know we've got the answer. It's Immortal Zealot. It's going to stop it every time. And when you get into a game, it's not going to happen. I mean, even look at that scenario I showed you. 10 Immortals. How many robotics facilities did this fictional Protoss player have to put out 10 Immortals at that stage of the game? It's just not practical. And that's why our other tools are so important, and why this is just one small piece of the arsenal we use to try to understand what's going on.
And of course, we have BattleNet stats, and the great thing about this is